Welcome to the Cheating and Love Tales channel. I came back home after a hard day at the office and didn't see my wife, Jane. I called out as I climbed the stairs, "I'm home." "I'll be right down, Tarzan," she replied. It was our little joke. We had met at a costume party where I was dressed as Tarzan. We nearly collided and I said, "Excuse me, you're Tarzan." She interrupted, poking my chest. "And I'm Jane," she said, pointing to her neckline, laughing. It turned out her name really was Jane. Since then, we had been Tarzan and Jane. We'd been married for what seemed like 5 happy years. I opened a beer, sat on the couch, and turned on the 6 o'clock news. The headlines finished just as Jane came down the stairs. My eyes almost popped out of their sockets. She was wearing my favorite little black dress. It came down to mid-thigh. And while the neckline might not have been red carpet worthy, it certainly wasn't modest. I knew it was completely backless, meaning she wasn't wearing a bra, though the movement of her chest gave that away. She also wore the necklace I had given her for our anniversary just a month ago. I took out my phone to capture this sight for posterity, though I didn't really know what I would use it for. "Wow, I didn't know we had a date," I said. "Let me freshen up and change. By the way, where are we going?" "We're not going anywhere," she replied. "Robert Cohen invited me to dinner and dancing tonight. I'll probably be late, so don't wait up for me." Bob Cohen, the smooth operator who got banned from all company parties for messing around with too many married women. "He's not like that," she said. "It was just one incident with a jealous husband causing all the trouble." "Well, there's one jealous husband here too, who says I won't allow you to meet him." "I don't belong to you," she said, heading toward the door. "Maybe you don't belong to me," I said, "but when we took our vows, we gave ourselves to each other. That means something to me. I thought it meant something to you too." "Oh, don't be so medieval. It's the 21st century. Nobody believes in that anymore." "Well, it's a pity you didn't tell me that earlier so we could get divorced and date whoever we want." "Divorce? Oh, come on," she laughed, tossing her head back. Following her to the door, I grabbed an old friend from the wardrobe. As Alexis pulled up into the driveway, I said, "Here comes Robert. Order yourself a pizza or something." She walked out the door. "Jane," I said, and as she turned, I ripped her dress off, leaving her standing there in just black panties and heels. She froze, then ran back into the house. I headed toward the Lexus, tapping a Louisville Slugger against my left palm. Cohen reversed, burning rubber as he sped away. Nodding to the neighbors who enjoyed Jane's free show, I returned to the house, put the bat back in the closet, grabbed a fresh beer as the first had warmed up, and sat back down, waiting for the fireworks. I didn't have to wait long before Jane stormed downstairs in a robe, furious. I couldn't keep up with her ranting and raving. Like Paul Simon said, I heard words I'd never heard in the Bible. I just sat there until she calmed down. "What were you thinking? What were you hoping for?" I asked. "I don't know. Our life has become so routine that we never seem to have fun like we used to. How did it come to this? Why am I only hearing about this now? Not to mention the last few times I tried to get you to do something different. You were too busy, or not interested, or it was gross. Even if you could somehow justify cheating, why humiliate me by trying to publicly humiliate me? Because I didn't want to deceive you. I thought if I told you, it wouldn't be cheating. That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. Having sex with someone else without my permission, that's definitely cheating. Maybe you'll give permission," she said, looking at me hopefully. "You've really lost your mind. I need to get out of here before I say or do something that one of us, or both of us, will regret." I grabbed the keys and bolted out of there before she could get up from her chair. I did what any manly man would do in this situation. I went to my favorite bar to drown my sorrows. "What's wrong, John?" Sam said, placing another bottle in front of me. "You look like you've lost your best friend." "Maybe you're not far off, Sam. When I came home tonight, Jane was dressed to kill and told me she's going out with this guy from work, and that I shouldn't wait for her. You definitely told her no, didn't you? Of course I did. What do you take me for? Just messing with you, dude. So, what happened next? Oh, she started spouting all the usual nonsense about how I don't own her, that fidelity is medieval. I take it you didn't buy into that. Ding, ding, ding. Got it in one. Right at that moment, that idiot pulled into the driveway, and Jane headed for the door. So, what did you do? I grabbed a persuasive tool from the closet, followed her, and ripped her dress off right there on the street. She froze for a moment, then realized all the neighbors could see her in just her panties and ran back into the house. I went to the car with my Louisville Slugger, and the guy took off. Looks like a win for you. So what brought you to my humble establishment? The victory was short-lived. I was sipping on a beer when she came downstairs, furious as a bear. After she calmed down a bit, she started babbling again. Our sex life was routine, she said, so it wouldn't be cheating since she didn't do it behind my back. Sam was speechless. That's when I had to get out of there. And here I am. Sam opened a couple more cold bottles. We clinked them and drank. I had another before deciding it was better to stop before risking a DUI. Good night and good luck, John. Thanks, Sam. I think I'll need it. When I got home, Jane was already in bed. I did my evening routine, put on my pajama pants, and lay down, turning my back to Jane. As I drifted off, I thought I heard her quiet sobbing, but I ignored it. The next morning, Jane was already up and making breakfast. Breakfast passed peacefully until we finished cleaning up, and Jane started again. John, why can't you see that times have changed? No one expects to spend their entire life with just one person. Well, I don't think I'm alone in disagreeing with that. Neither of us was a virgin. We dated other people. You know that's not what I mean. Back then, we were just kids, barely understanding where things were going. Now we have more experience, more opportunities to compare. I don't need to compare anything. I did plenty of comparing before I asked you to marry me. And I asked because I knew you were the one I wanted to spend my life with. I don't want a divorce. Well, you can't have it both ways. If you don't want a divorce, then you'll have to forget about this nonsense. Lowering her gaze, she said, I don't want a divorce. Then it's settled, I said, though I wasn't sure about it. Even though Jane insisted she had dismissed thoughts of another man, I found it hard to believe her. I worried every time she came home later than expected, especially if she didn't call in advance. I suspected she might still want to have a lover, but this time behind my back, so I began checking up on her. No, I didn't hire a detective, bug her phone, or install GPS on her car. I just started dropping by her work for lunch on random days and calling her at unexpected times. I felt the tension building between us, and I'm sure she felt it too. It even affected our love life, making it less spontaneous, more cautious, lacking the passion we once had. Finally, I snapped. Jane, I want a divorce. She was stunned. That I thought we were okay. Really? Do you think we're okay? Anywhere near where we used to be? She looked down and shook her head. Telling our parents was the hardest part. They couldn't understand why we couldn't work things out. When my father-in-law cornered me, I showed him a photo of her half-dressed, and he backed off. We faced a barrage of questions from family. I allowed the blame to fall on me to spare Jane embarrassment, but eventually I had to show everyone the photo and explain what she had tried to do. Receiving a full blast from the family, she came to me, seeking sympathy. John, is there really nothing I can do to change your mind about the divorce? I rested my chin on my hand, thinking of an idea she would never agree to. Okay, Jane, I won't stop the divorce, but I'll postpone it under one condition. Her mood brightened significantly. Anything, John, anything. Be careful what you say. Anything is a lot. I'm not worried, she said. I'm sure you won't lose your mind. What's the condition? I'll allow you to date other men as long as I can date other women. I was sure I saw her smirk before she hid it behind a sickly sweet smile. Sure, John. That's fair. Damn it. I bet she didn't think I could find another woman. There's one more thing, I said. What? You can't date until I set up a date. She seemed excited, and I knew she had someone in mind, and figured she was worried about what would happen if I didn't find anyone. I decided to throw her a bone. If I can't find someone in 2 weeks, you can go on your date. This elicited one of the brightest smiles I'd seen from her in weeks, and she wrapped her arms around my neck, kissing me. That's wonderful, John. Thank you. You'll see. This will liven up our marriage. Yeah. Liven it up or flush it down the toilet. Within a few days, she was shocked when I told her I had a date and suggested a double date the following Friday. She surely thought I was bluffing, and that she would have a date while I sat at home all alone. Without Jane's knowledge, I arranged a date that I hoped would put an end to this nonsense once and for all. On Monday, I had a long lunch to buy new clothes and left them in the car. On Friday, I left work early to style my hair and returned home before Jane, sneaking into the guest room with my new outfit. I was in the shower when I heard the garage door open. I shaved and brushed my teeth before heading to the bedroom to finish getting ready. I think I surprised her when I emerged from the guest room in my new attire and hairstyle, but she quickly recovered. Robert will pick me up at 6:30, she said. Okay. We've booked a table at Amelia's for 7 o'clock. It's under my name in case you get there before us, I said, heading out the door. What Jane didn't know was that we had a new colleague at work, Candace. She was a red-headed bombshell who made every red-blooded American man turn his head whenever she walked by. She was completely professional and never gave office gossips any reason to whisper. We developed a casual friendship, and whenever she flirted with me, I politely showed her my wedding ring. Needless to say, she was curious when I invited her for a drink after work. I got to the bar before her and stared into my glass. When she walked in, she said, "So, John, what happened to pull the last American Boy Scout out of his shell?" She laughed, but one look into my sad eyes wiped the teasing mood off her face. "Oh, John, I'm so sorry," she said, placing a warm hand over mine. "I didn't mean to tease you, but you're usually so straightforward. You look like you've lost your best friend." Tears started welling up in my eyes, and I turned away. She hugged me from behind, guided me to a table, and sat patiently as I composed myself and told her my sorrowful story. "Well," she said, "there's only one thing we can do." "We?" "Yes, we. I'll be your date." I laughed for the first time since Jane came up with this crazy idea. "Why are you laughing?" "I'm serious." For a few moments, I looked into her eyes, expecting a loud gotcha that never came. Finally, I realized she was serious. "Why? Why me? I know you don't mess around with married men. Hell, you barely mess around with single men. If they thought they had even half a chance, every straight guy and half the gay guys in the office would be lining up to date you. I'm not just looking for dates. Like you said, I can date any guy I want. I really like you, maybe because you don't undress me with your eyes all the time." "Yes," I said, "not all the time. I know sometimes you do. You'd have to be dead not to. But you always treat me with respect. When we meet, you listen to my ideas, support me when other guys try to brush them off just because they come from me. What's more important, I like you, and I'm mad at your wife for not respecting you. So, do we have a date or not?" Maybe I was born at night, but not last night. "You're on." I finished my drink, escorted Candace to her car, and after exchanging numbers, she hugged me as friends do and left. I thought my life was about to get very interesting. When I arrived at Candace's house, I barely had time to get out and open the door before she reached the car. She was a bit taller than Jane, but still shorter than me. Unlike Jane's ill-fated dress, Candace's was slightly longer than knee-length, but fitted, with a slit on the left side up to her thigh. It was emerald green, complementing her bright red hair that reached her mid-waist. It had noticeably more cleavage than I had ever seen on Jane, and Candace nearly slipped as I helped her into the car. When I sat in the driver's seat, I was treated to a creamy white thigh before she adjusted her dress, giving me a broad smile. "We'll have plenty of time for that later, cowboy," she said. I had to compose myself before driving, feeling awkward from her throaty laughter. As if I didn't feel shy enough, she began rubbing my thigh. Fortunately, we arrived at the restaurant before things went too far, and I was in control when we entered. Jane and Robert were already there. I had seen Robert a few times before, and his presence that evening left no more impression on me than other times. Jane, on the other hand, was beside herself, and I can't recall ever seeing her so heated. Since Robert didn't stand up, I didn't reach out to shake his hand, only nodded at Jane as I helped Candace sit down. Jane was clearly taken aback by the lovely date I had arranged. I think she was going to make a sarcastic remark, but she changed her mind. Robert, on the other hand, couldn't take his eyes off Candace's cleavage, and Jane had to jab him in the ribs to ensure his gaze didn't wander. I thought dinner might be awkward, but after a hesitant start, any casual observer would have thought we were just two ordinary couples, not a husband and wife with different partners. After dinner, we went to a club to have drinks and dance. When the dancing was fast-paced, there weren't any particular issues, but during the slow dances, when Candace pressed against me, Jane's glare could have killed. Jane began to show a special interest in Robert. She behaved as if she wanted to be closer to him than just dancing. Her behavior attracted a lot of attention, which in another situation might have embarrassed her, but she was absorbed in her own world. When Robert's hand slipped under her dress to touch her, I felt uncomfortable for her and led Candace back to the table. We continued to watch Jane and Robert put on a show until finally, a manager approached and patted them on the shoulder. While I obviously didn't hear what they were saying, they were apparently asked to leave because Jane ran to the table in tears, grabbed her wrap, and left the club, with Robert quickly following her. "Well, you certainly know how to have a good time with a girl," Candace giggled. I could only laugh, and we returned to the dance floor. When we were ready to leave, I approached the manager. "I would like to apologize for our companions," I said. "Please don't misunderstand, sir. You see, that was my wife, or I should say soon-to-be ex-wife, and I think she was a little jealous of my date." The manager looked a bit puzzled, then glanced at Candace from head to toe. "Understood, sir," he said with a smile. "Please come back any time," he added, returning to his duties. I escorted Candace to her apartment and walked her to the door. When I leaned in to give her a friendly goodnight kiss, she surprised me by pulling me in for a passionate kiss. "Want to come in for a nightcap?" she asked. For some reason, it seemed to me she had something more on her mind than just a nightcap. But who am I to argue? The nightcap was forgotten as soon as the door closed. When she pushed me onto the couch and straddled my knees, the slit in her dress opened wide, giving me a teasing view of lace panties. I spent the night with Candace. We took a shower separately, and while she finished up, I prepared breakfast for her. "Wow," she said, "great lover, and cook too. I might just have to keep you around." "About that," I said as we sat down at the table, "I really like you, and last night was absolutely the best sex I've ever had in my life. But I need to sort things out in my marriage. Even if we divorce, I don't know how soon I'll be ready for another relationship." "Don't worry, John," she said. "I was just teasing you. Don't get me wrong. I like you too, and if things work out, I could definitely see us in a relationship. But you're right. First, you need to sort things out with your wife." We finished eating and just chatted about trivial things until I decided I should go home and see if there was anything salvageable from my marriage. When I walked in, I saw Jane sitting at the kitchen table, holding a coffee mug in her hands. She looked at me with red, teary eyes. One look at my satisfied face brought on a fresh wave of tears. I took the coffee mug and sat across from her. "So, how was your night with Robert?" I asked. "Oh, John, it was awful. All I could think about was you with Candace. She's so sexy and beautiful. I know I can never compete with her." You realize you wouldn't have to worry about competing if you hadn't started this nonsense, I replied. She couldn't meet my gaze but nodded in agreement. I think I can confidently say you wouldn't be feeling this regret if it had just been you and Robert, and I stayed home alone. She looked up with teary eyes, then lowered them again and nodded once more. I just don't know what to do. Part of me wants to throw you to the curb and start over with someone new. Jane was openly crying now, and I could tell she was thinking about me with Candace. Then she looked at me, and I saw the woman I married. The woman I fell in love with. I didn't see a vengeful rival, but a silly girl who had made a terrible mistake. I thought, maybe there's a way back for us. Jane looked up, hope shining through her tears. I'm going to change and step out for a bit. While I'm gone, I think you should move your things to the guest room. When I come back, we'll talk some more. Please don't make me move out, John. How can we ever be together again if we're apart? I need you now more than ever. You don't understand what's going on, I said. It's not a given that we'll be together again. Maybe you should have thought about how much you needed me before you started this. I turned and headed upstairs to what had once been our bedroom. Jane sat at the table as I descended and headed for the door. John, she said, and I turned around. I love you. I just nodded and walked out of the house. I know it sounds cold, but I needed her to feel how shaky our marriage was. I walked down to the Charles River and strolled along the shore, watching the rowers and sailboats drifting on the water. Sitting on a bench, I watched families with young children passing by and felt a pang of sadness, wondering if I would ever see the children Jane and I had once talked about. I don't know how long I sat there, but as the sun set, I started to feel chilly. Taking a deep breath, I stood up and made my way home. When I entered the house, Jane was still sitting where I had left her. She looked at me hopefully, but I just shook my head sadly, went up to my room, and locked the door. I kicked off my shoes and stretched out on the bed, fully clothed, covering my eyes with my hand. I don't know how long I lay there like that before I heard a quiet knock on the door and a whisper, John. I didn't answer, and after a second attempt, I heard her walk down the hallway to the guest room. Making sure she had gone to sleep, I quickly took a shower and fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, I came downstairs to find that Jane had prepared a hearty breakfast, and to my surprise, I had a good appetite, even though Jane was just picking at her food. John, she said, do you think we could try seeing a therapist? Therapy? I mulled that over in my mind. I didn't know much about therapy. Would they try to convince me to agree with Jane's nonsense? If they tried, I could just leave. Did I want to sort everything out? One thing I had learned from my night with Candace was that our sex life had become dull and routine. Did I really want to go back to that? I was still angry that Jane had never come to me with complaints, but I decided that there was still enough love in my heart for Jane, and I didn't want to give up without a fight. All right, Jane. Let's try counseling, I said. She almost jumped out of her chair. Let's clarify one thing right now, I continued. I don't need a counselor who wants to save our marriage. Maybe it can be saved, maybe it can't. I won't tolerate any hidden agendas. I could tell she was disappointed. She must have been hoping for some new age, hippie psychoanalyst who would agree with her times have changed philosophy. But she had no choice but to agree. Surprisingly, the counseling was effective. Jane had to see how her refusal to work with me had actually affected her dissatisfaction with our relationship. I realized I needed to be more assertive, and we talked more openly about what we wanted, needed, and expected from each other. Although counseling helped us address many of our issues, I was still fixated on her betrayal, even if I didn't let her finalize it. On her part, Jane couldn't overcome her insecurity revolving around Candace. No matter how much I explained that, while I had some feelings for Candace, I wasn't in love with her, and our date was just a response. She couldn't accept it. In the end, we decided to divorce amicably. Once the divorce became final, I reflected on my life. No, I didn't immediately reach out to Candace. Instead, I booked a room at a bed and breakfast on the coast of Maine. It was off-season, so the weather was questionable, but it suited my mood. I just wanted to relax, do some soul-searching, and figure out where I wanted to go next. Upon returning, I called Candace. We went out for dinner, and I let her tuck me into bed, though it was more for comfort than passion. The next morning, as we lay in bed, I lazily played with her hair. "Penny for your thoughts, John. I was thinking about how easy it would be to just sweep you off your feet and ask you to do this forever. And the easy path isn't always the best. Yes, we have a real connection." She smirked at me. "Get your mind out of the gutter. I mean more than just sex, you pervert. I really like you, and I know I could easily fall in love with you, but I'm not sure if it would be fair to either of us. My divorce is still fresh and unresolved, and I worry it could lead to a rebound. I think it would be better if we both saw other people for a while, as well as each other. I don't know how long this might last, and I won't ask you to wait until I sort myself out. I'd argue with you, but I'm afraid you're right," she said. "While I really think we can make it work, it's probably better to be sure than to regret it later." We got out of bed, used the bathroom separately, and then had breakfast calmly. I was tempted to throw caution to the wind and forget about seeing other people, and I think Candace would have agreed. But I was firm in my decision. After we finished cleaning up, she walked me to the door, and we hugged with tears in our eyes. "I think this is goodbye," she said. "No, I disagree. Why don't we meet for dinner, say, 2 weeks from this Friday, just to check in?" "Okay," she said, kissing me on the cheek and leading me out the door. The sound of the door closing was like the sound of a prison door, and I wasn't sure if I hadn't made the worst mistake of my life. I spent the rest of the week doubting my sanity. On Friday, I decided to join friends for dinner and drinks. We were seated in a corner booth at the back of the restaurant facing the door. We were just finishing dessert when I saw her walk in. Candace was with a tall, handsome guy. Who was I kidding? Of course he was tall and handsome. I was torn between approaching to say hello and just observing, but I decided it wouldn't be in line with our agreement. I was disappointed at how quickly she seemed to have moved on. You might call me a coward because I waited until she went to the restroom before throwing some cash on the table and quickly wishing my friends good night. I was angry at her for not waiting long to get back into the game, and even angrier at myself. This was exactly what we had agreed on. One thing was for sure. I was going to set up a date. I flattered myself with the hope that I was a decent catch, and I had no trouble arranging a date for the following Friday evening. Her name was Cheryl Thompson. She worked as a secretary for one of my clients, and in the past, we had exchanged some innocent flirting. She knew I was married but readily agreed when I hinted that I was divorced. I always thought Cheryl was business attractive, but I wasn't prepared for the vision that greeted me at her door, and I think my surprise was obvious. "I think I'm pretty well prepared," she said. "That's an understatement. You look like you're ready to go." "Yeah, just let me grab my coat." I helped her slip on her coat, and we set off. Dinner was filled with the usual first date chatter, except for the topic of my divorce. She was shocked by Jane's actions, and over coffee and dessert, I decided to lay my cards on the table. "Cheryl, I don't want to deceive you. Before my divorce, I got involved with someone, and after my divorce, we became quite serious. We were both concerned about how quickly we were moving and the risks of rebounding, so we decided to date other people for a while. I don't want you to think I'm just using you as a filler or something like that. I'm completely open to whatever may come out of this, wherever it may lead." Her laughter had a charming ring to it. "John, this is just our first date. I'm not expecting any commitments, but I appreciate your honesty. Like you said, let's just play it by ear and see where it goes." With that awkwardness behind us, we embarked on a very pleasant date that ended with a warm kiss on the lips and plans for another on Saturday. Meanwhile, on Friday, I had a dinner date with Candace, and I had no idea how it was going to unfold. I took her hands, and she looked as beautiful as ever. We chatted effortlessly on our way to the restaurant, but once we placed our orders with the waiter, she turned serious. "You know, I saw you," she said. I just raised an eyebrow. "I was at dinner and saw you with your friends. I was going to come over and say hello, but when I came out of the restroom, you were already gone." I was a bit embarrassed. I know we agreed to see other people, but seeing you with another man so soon, well, I guess I was a little jealous. Silly, I know. But John, you had no reason to be jealous. Stefan was an old friend of mine whom I hadn't seen in a long time, and when he called, I took advantage of our break to accept his dinner invitation. I'm sorry if it upset you. No need to apologize. Any upset was in my own head. Actually, it inspired me to get off my butt and ask someone out. We had dinner last week. Now it was her turn to raise an eyebrow. "Should I be jealous?" she asked with a smile. "Oh, I don't think so, though we do have another date tomorrow evening. We both agree there are no commitments, just two people getting together to have a good time." "That's sweet," she said with a thoughtful smile. "You deserve to have a good time." Further awkward conversation was saved by the arrival of our meals, and the conversation turned to more pleasant topics. "Want to go dancing?" I asked, holding the car door open for her. "No, I think it would be better if you just take me home." She drove quietly home, staring out the window. We reached her door, kissed, perhaps with a bit more passion than intended, and gently pulled away from each other. "Please stay in touch, John." "I will." "Good night, Candace," I said, and hurriedly retreated to my car before trying to drag her inside. My date with Cheryl went well, and our goodnight kiss was warmer, with some gentle caressing, but we still parted before things went too far. Although I talked to Candace about every week, our paths didn't cross. I don't know if we subconsciously avoided each other, or if it was just fate. I saw Cheryl a few more times, and we did end up in bed, which was fun but didn't have that spark. After the third night together, Cheryl dropped a bomb on me. "John, I think this should be the last time." "What?" "I thought everything was fine between us." "Oh, it is, maybe even too fine." "Now your words don't make sense." "John, when we started this, we said no commitments, and I said I wasn't looking for any. I didn't have any then, and I don't now, but I'm developing feelings for you. If we continue, I think we might go somewhere I'm just not ready for. I'd rather cause you pain now, while the feelings aren't too deep, than later when it would really hurt you. I hope that makes sense." Strangely enough, it did. I can't say it doesn't hurt, but I'll get through it. I dressed, kissed her on the forehead, and headed for the door. "Good night, Cheryl." "Goodbye, John," she said with a sad smile, tears glistening in her eyes. Closing the door behind her, I pondered my next move. That next move involved a series of women. Some were one-night stands, some were flings, though none as serious as Cheryl. Finally, I realized what was missing in my life, and picked up the phone. "Hello," she answered. "Candace, it's me, John," I said, forgetting she had caller ID. "Candace, I don't know how you're doing, but I'm not worried about rebounds anymore. I've had more rebounds than a pinball machine, and I'm on the upswing. If I can still be with you, I want to come home." On the other end of the line, there was silence, and I feared I had missed my chance. "How soon can you come over?" she finally replied. Jane didn't leave town in disgrace, or live a lonely life surrounded by cats. She wasn't seeking work in a Mexican brothel either. While I wasn't particularly interested, mutual friends informed me she was dating, although apparently there was no one she was seriously involved with. Candace even wanted to invite Jane to our wedding. Although I wasn't sure it was such a good idea, I didn't object. But Jane declined, sending a nice gift instead. I was surprised when Candace struck up a casual friendship with Jane, occasionally meeting for coffee or shopping. It didn't bother me, though it was certainly unusual. About 6 months after we got married, I came home and found Candace dressed to go out. Oh, I thought to myself, here we go again. Fortunately, my concerns turned out to be unfounded. "Go change," she said. "We're meeting Jane at Amelia's for dinner. Listen, I know you two have become quite friendly, but don't you think this is a bit much? Don't worry, darling. My madness has a method to it. I knew better than to argue with her when she had an idea in her head, so I just shrugged and went to change." Jane was already waiting at the venue, and to call the situation awkward would be an understatement. Candace and Jane exchanged cheek kisses as all women do, while I stood there, feeling awkward and clueless. None of us seemed to know what to do next, and then Jane spoke up. "John, nice to see you. You look good." "Thanks, Jane. You look great too." We were spared from even greater awkwardness when we were escorted to our table. Candace paused briefly, saying something to the person behind the counter. "What does all this mean?" I asked when she caught up with us. "You have nothing to worry about, dear," she said. "Now, every husband knows that when his wife says nothing, it means something, and he should be concerned." But again, I could do nothing but play along and hope for the best. Jane sat to my right, and Candace sat opposite. Before we could even order drinks, the owner approached with Stefan. Candace stood up, warmly hugged him, and seated him to my left, opposite Jane, revealing her cunning plan. While I felt relieved that my worst fears were unfounded, the evening truly had the makings of a disaster. Fortunately, Jane and Stefan seemed to get along, and conversation flowed smoothly throughout dinner. Apparently, we were like four old friends. Too soon, it seemed. It was time to leave. Stefan and I split the bill, and as Candace and I left, Jane and Stefan decided to continue the evening at the restaurant's bar. Candace was so confident, and I couldn't be angry, although perhaps not for long. They clearly started off on a good note. I assuaged my guilt for underestimating her by giving her a sensual massage before making gentle love to her. We maintained cordial but distant relations with Jane and Stefan. We rarely interacted as couples, though we often met in groups. Apparently, they have a stable relationship, and Jane seems to no longer need to liven things up. We wish them all the best. Candace and I couldn't be happier, although the baby's kicking really wakes her up at night.